You're online, go on, please.
Bonjour. Vous recommencez?
Good afternoon. Can we start? All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We would like to welcome you to this event on the need to integrate a gender perspective in the recovery response to COVID-19 in agri-food sectors and also in rural Mediterranean areas. So this event is organized by the UfM and the Ciheam, which is the Agronomics International Studies Center. And we will tell you a bit more about this institution. This event is within the framework of the 5th high-level meeting called Women for the Mediterranean. And this is actually the hashtag that you can follow in social media. We are so happy, we are glad at the UfM to put forward this gender approach in rural areas and in agri-food sector. We are convinced that this dimension on development and regional cooperation is going to provide new hints and new, more integrative solutions and more equitable and fair solutions, not only for women, but for marginalized territories. This is a new paradigm that we're offering here for a positive Mediterranean that we all call for. Now, in the next 3 hours for this side event, we are going to discuss all together with high-level panelists how this crisis that has hit women, especially in the agri-food sector and in rural areas. So we're going to wonder what kind of measures we could implement in order to tackle these problems that are aggravating or that are arising. So we're lucky enough to have here amongst us high-level panelists and experts, and I'm going to introduce them briefly. Maybe I can have the slides for the agenda. And during this opening session, we're going to be honored to listen to Her Excellency Pakisa Bani, who's the Minister for Water Resources, Agri-Food and Fisheries from Tunisia. We're also going to listen to Mr. Plata Plata Lopez, Mrs. Marcela Villarreal, who's the Director of the Partnerships and UN Collaboration at the FAO, and then Leonard Midzi, Mr. Leonard Midzi, who's the head of unit at the European Commission on the DG for Rural Development, Security and Nutrition. This opening session is going to be followed by a first session. Next slide, please. Impact and responses to protect and to promote the role of women during the COVID-19 pandemic. This session will include our colleague Silvia Barbatello, who is a coordinator of a Ciheam network financed by the Italian Corporation in order to promote the value of women in the supply chain in the agricultural sector and to promote as well a gender approach in all agricultural policies. And then Mrs. Ghislaine Marnouche, who is a social entrepreneur, and she's also an activist for a regenerative economy. And she's going to tell us a bit more about this regenerative economy. And she's going to give us a hint about the situation in Morocco. She's going to tackle how social and fair economy can be a lever to a fairer or to better respond to the crisis. And then we will listen about some experiences about startups in Tunis that have been developed. And in particular, one startup for social protection and coverage for women in the agricultural sector. And then we will listen to Mrs. Ismaran Detri, who started a company on dairy products. And she has been working in collaboration with the Ciheam Montpellier. This first session will be moderated by Mrs. Gaëlle Ferrand, who's an economist at the OECD. And last but not least, we will have a second session. In the second session, we will see how education, research, and innovation in agri-food sector can tackle the negative effects of the crisis on women. So the second session, please, next slide, is going to gather my colleague who's covering the project Gender Smart, which is a promising initiative in order to integrate sciences and research. And we will also listen to Mrs. Carmen Urmano, who is the General Director for Agri-Food Innovation and Promotion at Aragon's government here in Spain. This last session will be moderated by Mr. Tomás García Azcárate, who is a member of the Consulting Committee at Ciheam, and he's also Deputy Director of the Institute of Economy, Geography and Demography, and he's also a member of the Académie de l'Agriculture in France. So, well, I think we have two very beautiful sessions ahead, and now without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Plaza. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure to meet you all in the framework of this meeting, Women for the Mediterranean, to which we had already participated in the edition that was held in Lisbon. And back then, there was the added value of having a presential session. But of course, I think that the colleagues who prepared the current session at the Union for the Mediterranean, Yasmin Chenou, and well, I really want to thank and to express my gratitude for all the preparation and all the efforts they have put forward. Well, for this session, I think we're going to also have a very nice outcome, even though it is happening virtually. It is a pleasure to meet you all in the framework of this very well-structured and solid cooperation that we have built up with the Union for the Mediterranean for many years now, on many different topics as well that are fundamental for the region. But namely, we are here concerned about gender empowerment, and Yasmin is going to give us more insights on these topics. And this is one of the priority leads of work for our institution when it comes to adapting and contributing to sustainable development goals for the Euro-Mediterranean region. I would like to greet friends and colleagues that we know for some time ago. It's a pleasure to see you all, at least virtually. And I would also like to greet and welcome all the people, all the participants who wished to be here today in order to learn about all this expertise. And I would like now to broadcast a video with a message by Madame Bahri, who's the Minister of Agriculture in Tunisia. And well, she's a minister in a country that has always been at the forefront of women's rights and women's inclusion in economy. So Mrs. Bahri is an expert in the field of agro-food chains and agriculture and resource management in the field of agriculture. And she's developed all of this for many years, and now she will be able to define these policies much, much better. So it is such a pleasure to introduce her. And the ministerial meeting of the Ciheam will, by the way, be held, as long as the situation allows for this. Well, the meeting will be held in Tunisia, and we're going to talk about social and economic inclusion of women and young people. So for many reasons, the insight of Madame Bahri seems so important for us. So we acknowledge her work, and we thank her for her presentation. So actually, we're going to broadcast the video by the minister. Oh, this is not the one, I'm afraid. Yeah, it seems this is not the right video. I'm sorry. We would like the video by Mrs. Akisa Bahari. We should be able to watch this in a few seconds. Well, we're waiting for the video to download, and I really encourage you to join the social media to follow this video. This event is broadcasted live on Facebook, and well, I'm sure that you can find all the documents as well, and all the documents by the UfM and by the Ciheam. So, well, it seems that unfortunately there's a technical issue with the video. Yeah, the audio doesn't come up. We can't hear the video, even though we can see it. Rural women represent 4% of the owners and 50% of the workforce, 80% of the forestry workforce and of the permanent workforce. And they're part of the workers. I'm sorry, the sound is really poor. We're going to do our best. Many efforts have been undertaken by Tunisia in terms of economic, social, legislative efforts in order to encourage women to get remuneration for their work and to help the more vulnerable. Since independence, all these successive governments in Tunisia have had the Ministry for Women. In 2017, there's been an initiative for the empowerment of women in rural areas, and this initiative has been implemented together with a participative approach that includes civil society and organizations. And now women enjoy better life conditions thanks to this development program that was developed by the state on education and health. Also, there's been an improvement in basic infrastructure, and women are concerned about this. However, women are also concerned by school dropouts and illiteracy. It is amongst women that we find the highest rates as well of mortality. And there's also a high rate of child mortality and maternal mortality. Rural women are especially concerned about poverty and precarious conditions of work. Only 3% of women working in rural areas have their own resources and their own revenue, against 90% of men. Rural women need more than ever their financial autonomy and their independence. They have to be better equipped to face the future, and they have to be able to face their needs on a daily basis. They need to guarantee school for their children, and they play a an indispensable role when it comes to the agricultural sector, and whenever they can work in a more independent manner, the crops are more productive and more sustainable. Giving women the same access to technology and to opportunities will allow them to contribute more significantly to fight against poverty, malnutrition, and starvation. So empowerment of women in trade and agriculture is going to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. We are now in 2020, and we have found out that women must still face many constraints and obstacles that prevent them from becoming the main characters and actors and real actors in the contribution to, in their full contribution to growth and to the growth of their country. They're also discriminated in terms of their salary, their wages, and they're more exposed to temporary work or seasonal work or poorly remunerated work. Within the pandemic, women in the sector of agriculture and fisheries have to play a double role. They're exposed to the health issues, and they also have to work, and together with that, they have to take care of their families in conditions of lockdown, and there's a poor adaptation to those conditions in rural areas. They are obliged to contribute, and they have to face losses of revenue. The impact of COVID-19 has led to dissemination actions in order to inform about the situation of women. There's a program led by the state in order to help the most vulnerable populations, in order to guarantee food security, especially for vulnerable people in rural areas, and especially in an environment where there is a digital gap. There has to be a better network also when it comes to exports, and in order to enjoy better opportunities with third countries. The actions that we have undertaken for women include coaching, technical coaching for women, so that their products can meet hygiene and quality standards. We have also implemented technological platforms in order to help women commercialize their work, in order to help them convert their crops into ecological crops. And we have also improved the access to credit for women. Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary General, please. Well, thank you. There was a slight technical problem at the beginning of the video, but I would really like to invite you, to encourage you to listen to this carefully. I think Yasmin said that this is going to be available. Mrs. Bahrid has underlined the guidelines of their policy in favor of gender inclusion. And her thoughts about priority issues to be developed in the future were very inspiring. I think that this actually is going to be highlighted during her mandate, during her presence and responsibility. So I really invite you to watch the video more thoroughly. Now, before giving the floor back to Yasmin, I would like to say a couple of things about the Ciheam and why Ciheam and why are we tackling gender empowerment as well. So if I may have my first slide, please. Next. So many of you must know, but in case you do not know, Ciheam is an intergovernmental organization here in the Euro-Mediterranean region and beyond. It was founded to develop cooperation in the framework of agriculture, and not only when it comes to agricultural production, but also food security and, development understood as something large and broad. And we want to develop all of this thanks to specific tools. We are a cooperation organization. We're an organization that promotes development in the region via the tools that we have from our founding members and the tools that have been developed throughout time when it comes to capacity building and when it comes to political dialogue and development, support to research as well. Well, our institution is really rooted on all of that, and we're rooted in the Mediterranean region, not only thanks to these institutes, but also thanks to a network of national institutions which are our partners throughout the region. Next slide, please. The definition of sustainable development goals has had an impact, of course, when it comes to prioritizing and when it comes to establishing a strategic framework in which the Ciheam can really mainstream and improve its contribution to the sustainable development goals. And in order to do so, we have obviously made an internal effort, but also an external effort with our international partners, with Agricultural Food Organization and with all of our partners, with our member states. We have really made efforts in order to establish and to set priority lines. And these priority actions or lines are identified depending on our real capacity for undertaking actions and depending on the priorities that were established by member states and by our partners. So within these action lines, and I really do not want to dwell on them, but I have to say that, well, the reason why we are putting so much effort in gender and so many resources in gender is because it is actually one of the priorities that were defined by the countries. And, well, it will actually be a main topic within the next interministerial meeting of the Ciheam, because we have a political high-level forum ahead that will include agricultural ministers in developing countries, such as Mrs. Bahri, that we just heard. And we're going to talk about empowerment of women and youth, and this has been defined as one of the priorities. So that's why we want to contribute to that with the different ways of action that we have and with the different partners. Because, well, this is now a topic and that has to be permanent topic, and this is a cross-cutting topic for us. Thank you. Yasmin, you have the floor. Next slide. So to complete what has been wonderfully described by the Secretary General, and without repeating what will be said by the next panelist, I would like to say that within those priorities that were announced, there's a working group that gathers the General Secretary and the 4 institutions of the Ciheam. So this working group has been developed, and it's on women empowerment in agri-food sector and rural areas. And the main aim of this working group is to integrate the gender approach in a cross-cutting way in all of the activities of our organization, namely training, capacity building, political dialogue, And of course, all of this is going to be done in close cooperation with member states, with institutional partners, and with actors in the field, actually, public and private actors, because without them and without their participation, nothing can move forward. And now, without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to our two keynote speakers who will tell us about gender issues in the field of agriculture in rural areas in the Mediterranean region. They're going to tell us about the impact of the crisis, and they're going to highlight the policies, the initiatives that may be developed. So, Mrs. Villarreal, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to share my screen.
Increases in nutrition, an important increase in agricultural productivity and in amount of food produced. So this is as valid at that time, and actually that study was one of the underpinning arguments that led to the current formulation of SDG 5. You will see that in SDG 5 about gender equality, it's not only about education, as the previous agenda was, it's about equal access to resources, all the more so in the rural areas. If we were able to ensure this, then we would have massive societal gains in terms of food security and nutrition. And as I said before, in other aspects, there are big spillover effects around health, around education, around everything that we would desire in a development agenda. Now, there are massive gender inequalities in the Mediterranean region. I think that the minister spelled them out very, very clearly. And I'd just like to focus on two of these. Land, access to land, and then talk about the important subject of representation. Now, let us look a little bit just very quickly in terms of agricultural holders in the Mediterranean. You will see in the northern part of the Mediterranean that women hold from 11 to around 30% of agricultural holdings in their name, whereas in the southern part of the Mediterranean, we see that those numbers vary between 3 and 7%. So here we're talking about one of the inequalities in access to natural resources, which is land, but land is fundamental for women's economic empowerment, for women's economic autonomy, as the minister said. So without land, people are denied access to finance because they want land as collateral. So land and equal access to land is a very fundamental aspect of the agenda that we want for the future, that enables also access to other fundamental resources for women's empowerment. Now let us look at another aspect, which is about representation and organization. And we will see the representation of women in parliament. World average is around 24%. And I say there's nothing to be proud about that. It's really, really low. In the part of Southern Europe, that representation, women in parliament, is 27%. It's a little better, but quite frankly, extremely yet low. And in the Middle East and North African region, it is 18%. So here again, another very important dimension of gender equality is about voice, is about being able to bring to the political forum, to the policy forum, to the legislation forum, and have the enabling environment, is equal voice among men and women. And we are doing not very well in the whole world and also in the Mediterranean. Now, another very important aspect is representation in organizations and how well people are organized. This is something that the minister mentioned. But in terms of women's organizations, this is even more crucial. It's even more crucial because now we're facing a massive crisis, we all know. But we have seen, and our studies have shown, that strong organizations are the basis of resilience. And therefore, strong organizations are crucial, especially during crisis. And strong women's organizations are even more crucial because this is the way we have of having women's voices, having their perspectives, and having their ability to inform and also to influence policy decisions, those decisions that are going to affect their own lives and livelihoods. Now, we know that COVID-19 has increased everybody's vulnerability. We're all more vulnerable because of this pandemic. But the structural inequalities that underpin women's lack of access to resources make them even more vulnerable in times of crisis, and even more vulnerable in times of a crisis like this one. So this crisis has seen a restriction of mobility. We all know, we're all probably all of us, I'm talking from home. So this restriction of mobility affects women and in all of their different roles in the agricultural sector, from agricultural producers, managers, processors, traders, wage earners, and entrepreneurs. The lockdown itself has created, we would say, havoc in terms of linkages between the urban and the rural sectors, and therefore, obviously, the ability to arrive at the urban markets with produce. And this is even stronger in the case of women who are sometimes facing more mobility problems than men. Women, we know, are more likely to hold informal and precarious employment than men, and this is throughout the economic sphere. This is in the urban areas, this is in the rural areas, very importantly in the rural areas. And in times of massive economic downturn, as the one that we are seeing today, this is, of course, a source of major vulnerability and precariousness. Overall reduction of economic opportunities. Access to health services, of course, is already a major factor for women in the rural areas, who in some cases also face not only the physical barriers, but also the cultural barriers for mobility and sometimes seclusion. But access to health services becomes even more discriminatory against women than is usually the case. Increased gender-based violence, we have been seeing it in different parts of the world, north and south, because of the lockdown, because of the situation created by the virus itself, of fear, of difficulty, of lack of economic opportunity. And women suffer more the increased household workload, which is usually the case, but even more so during an epidemic. And again, here we are seeing that the women's organizations are often excluded, and this is an area of major concern. So let us turn to policy measures. Now, more importantly than ever, but this is always the case, sex and age disaggregated data. This is something we are really lacking. The data I showed you in terms of land access in the Mediterranean is from an FAO database. But here again, you saw that there are many countries missing there. And for something as evident as land, imagine for many of the other aspects that are behind women's inequality. So really, this is the time to ensure availability of sex disaggregated data, gender and age disaggregated data, because if not, we cannot really monitor the impact of the gender-related impacts, and we cannot have the basis of sound policy to address these gaps and to address these inequalities. Now more than ever, again, we need policies, strong policies that will ensure women equal access to productive resources. Very specifically, financial services, which is one of the most important issues of inequality, and one of the main issues that is necessary for rural women's economic autonomy and empowerment, and also address access to market, revise mobility restrictions, especially for the family farmers. We need to prioritize support in terms of labor for informal, part-time, seasonal workers, because we know that this is where women mostly are. Ensure social protection and ensure not only that we do have mechanisms of social protection, but ensure, very importantly, that those social protection measures will take extra measures to ensure that they do arrive at women and are responsive to women's needs. And finally, invest in women's leadership and in their strengthened organizations. Now, more than ever, strong organizations are necessary because of their association to resilience. Without increasing resilience and understanding the gender dimensions that we need to address to have improved societal resilience, we will never be able to face the impact of this epidemic. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Villarreal. Mr. Mehdi, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup.
Mr. Mehdi, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Yasmin. Thank you, Placido. Also, actually, I just, I carried out my first studies at Ciheam in Montpellier. So I want to thank the Union for the Mediterranean and Montpellier also.
And what we will say. I'll try to be a bit operational in terms of what we are doing as European Union on the issues that Marcella mentioned. COVID evidently is having major shocks, in particular on women, on young people, on adolescents, and on children. I just give you figures which we got from UN Women, that COVID-19 is expected to worsen the situation, resulting in a loss of 1.7 million jobs in the Arab region, including around 700,000 jobs held by women, with rural women being the most affected than those living in urban areas. So I think the timing of this event is important. Next week, there will be an important report which the International Land Coalition will unveil on land inequalities. And I suggest that the participants also tune in, because this report also deals with what Marcella said, if you don't address the fundamentals of access to resources, access to land, access to water, access to finance, then whatever we will say in the coming 1 or 2 hours will not have much impact, because these are the fundamental change processes that need to be addressed at the core of the problematic around gender mainstreaming. First of all, there is a vital need to empower women to address food systems and transition to agricultural value chains, to promote equity, resilience, and sustainability to build back better in the wake of the pandemic. We see various approaches. First of all, partnerships. As you know, the European Union is in the phase of programming for the period 2021-2027. And what we are doing with our member states in the process of transparency at local level, at the delegations, including in the Mediterranean region, is to focus on partnerships, to focus on development impact, but also to have complementarities on the ground. We can work unilaterally and get some positive results, but if we join forces and coordinate better our work in an integrated way, we will reach greater results. COVID and the ensuing economic crisis has sparked a shift in focus towards regional markets. For example, in Africa, we have the new Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which the minister mentioned, which incentivizes intercontinental trade and value chain development. All this may prove an opportunity to ensure that the newly emerging value chain policies put gender equality and women empowerment as a central concern and not just as an afterthought. Boosting resilience and empowerment of rural women who comprise the hidden middle of agricultural value chains, the links that hold our food system together, could be an effective strategy to promote long-term recovery of households, communities, and rural livelihoods. Not only has this been shown to impact positively the performance of value chains and productive capacity of small farms, cooperatives, but also has the potential to generate 25% of rural employment in midstream and downstream by supporting women-led agricultural small and medium-sized enterprises. In the European Union, we have just unveiled the Farm to Fork initiative, which is at the heart of the EU Green Deal strategy. We need a new and better balance of nature, of agri-food systems, of biodiversity to protect our people's health and well-being across the globe. Women and girls being an important priority. By working through and with women farmers, we can influence socio-economic and environmental well-being in communities. We must target our support so that they can access and avail knowledge and tools needed for more efficient agricultural practices, access to quality seeds, inputs, post-harvest technology, climate-smart agriculture, quality equipment and technology, right through eco-friendly packaging. By easing the labor hardship of women, increasing their productivity and yields, we can also influence the reduction of child labor and improve the status of women in a household level and in society. We need to balance our support between food and commodity crops to ensure gender equality in access to both financial and technical resources, balancing support to export crops with investment in production of local nutritious food crops. Women play key roles in all of these supply chains, yet their contribution often remains invisible as they are not at the financial transaction stage of the commodity value chains, or they work primarily in catering for the local market in loose, unstructured, unregulated agri-value chains, crops of little interest to investors or large corporate actors. We need to grow more resilient and gender-responsive institutions. The COVID crisis has clearly exposed it, confirming the additional burden women need to bear. We now need to mobilize holistic, more system solutions. And to do this, we need innovative problem solving that involve expertise from across the donor community. breaking silos to ensure that women and their socio-economic interests are central in our agri-trade policy approach, in our agri-investment strategies, and benefit from findings of our scientific research. For example, we have collaborated with the 3 Rome-based agencies, including FAO, but also IFAD and the World Food Programme, with a 5 million contribution that aims at taking the gender transformative approaches to scale for the impact on SDG 2 to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. The scope of this section is to contribute to the achievement of food and nutrition security and sustainable agri-food development to address the root causes of gender inequalities. We will do this principally in, but not limited to, rural areas and trigger transformative change processes that lead to the empowerment of women in households, communities, and societies at large. We need to identify bottom-up solutions led by and for women producers who are best placed to understand their own strengths and needs, particularly initiatives embracing digital technology and promoting financial inclusion. Supporting women in leadership within cooperatives also improves governance, transparency, and equity in access to resources. We need to support women agri-SMEs who are often working as aggregators, processors, distributors, and market retailers of produce, linking women farmers, farmer organizations, and cooperatives. We want to trigger transformative change that lead to achievement of gender equality and empowerment of women and girls in their households, communities, and society. We know that we cannot meet the SDGs without improving the status of women. This is well reflected in all our actions, not just in the agricultural sector. Gender equality is at the core of European values, and the European Union is already a front runner in this area. But we need and we will do more to support leadership in driving positive change for the whole of communities. In our forthcoming Gender Action Plan, the 3rd phase, this is an ambitious vision for gender equality, and it will be adopted in the coming days. GAP 3, just like the previous Gender Action Plans, will promote support to economic and social rights for women and girls. Without revealing the details before its launch next week, I can assure you that we will continue to focus on enhancing equal opportunities for women and men in employment, and particularly women's access to finance, by providing innovative investment schemes to address market failure to reach women. Promoting gender equality to trade policies is also key, including in the EU's engagement around work on aid for trade. We will continue to work to integrate gender in all EU external actions. This will allow us to accelerate progress and to deliver on international commitments and the 2030 Agenda. For example, I would like to also mention the work that we are doing around the different action tracks of the UN Food System Summit. Marcella knows this process will culminate in the UNGA, so the UN General Assembly in 2021, and I think it's important to put a gender lens in the various action tracks. Also in the scientific committee, which will give a bit of a linkage between what this transformation process will do, including on agroecology. So I think what today's meeting will do, hopefully we can be in a transformative mode, in close collaboration with the member states of the Mediterranean, culminating hopefully with the ministerial that Placido mentioned, the ministerial in Tunis. So this would give feed-through advice within the UN Food System Summit. As you know as well, the Italian government will chair G20 next year, and agri-food systems will also be at the core. So if we join all the dots between the G20 process, the UN process, what's happening in the Mediterranean around food systems, around also climate change and biodiversity, we can put at the core a transformative process in close partnership, in close dialogue with the partner countries in the Mediterranean, because this is the way forward to actually engage in dialogue and in multi-stakeholder dialogues where women are at the core also of the decision-taking process. Thanks, and ready for any questions. Over to you.
Je vous remercie énormément, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madame Villarreal and Mr. Mizzi, for these words that describe perfectly all the different obstacles that we have and the challenges that we still need to overcome. And you have given us points of hope, just talking about all those partnership and all these different dynamics that will allow us to find solutions in order to change the life of women in rural areas and in the agri-food sector. So please don't leave us, because after the first session that will be moderated by Gael, you will have the possibility to participate in the debate, and we will have some questions to ask you. We will have one recommendation from each one of you to ask you. So basically, I am not controlling time very well, because we are 10-15 minutes late. So now, very fastly, I will just give the floor to Gael Ferrand, and I'm very sorry for not controlling the time. So please follow us. All these issues that you all evoked during this opening session will be tackled in a different way with different points of view in the first and the second session. So I encourage you to stay with us. And at the end of this day, we will have the general conclusions. And thank you very much. And now I give the floor to Gael.
This session aims first at discussing the gender-differentiated effects of the ongoing COVID-19 crisis on rural population. Our three distinguished speakers will notably share their views on how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted women in agriculture, but also in processing and distribution professions. Second, this session will focus on the ways forward, drawing on their own experience and expertise, the three panelists, but also the distinguished speakers of the first session, plenary session, will provide insights on what we should do to ensure that gender-sensitive policy responses address the needs of rural women. These we includes actors at the international, national, and local level. These we notably raises the question of which alliances, which networks could better serve a gender-responsive agenda in post-COVID-19 recovery, again, that takes into account the specific need of rural women. How does it work? So let's first engage a conversation with our three distinguished panelists. Then we will open the floor for Q&A to both the keynote speakers from the FAO and the European Commission and our three panelists. All attendees would have the opportunity to ask questions using the chat box. So please, à vos claviers. Let me first introduce our speakers. As I said, I'm very excited by this today's discussion that I do think will foster the dialogue between various key stakeholders, including the European Commission and the FAO, the Ciheam, the OECD, but also civil society organizations. They will try to voice rural women's needs, and this is really key. As we will discuss, I hope maybe later on, in this kind of emergency situation, in the context of emergency, we really need to better understand what are the needs of the different population we call vulnerable, but that are also agents of change by themselves and never passive. And to me, dialogue is key because of this need for a whole of society approach. At the OECD, we recently hosted an online discussion towards a gender responsive approach to food and nutrition security in the Sahel and West Africa. We looked at the issue related to food and nutritional security. And it also means that we were looking at the issues faced by rural women, who are the backbone of our food economies and rural transformations more generally. This discussion was hosted with the Sahel and West Africa Club of Secretariat, the Agence Française de Développement, the Permanent Interstate Committee for Drought Control in the Sahel, and the G7 Sahel. And this discussion highlighted the main barriers to a systematically gender approach to food and nutrition security in the Sahel and West Africa. But however, what we found were some universal takeaways. One of these takeaways was how difficult it can be to ensure meaningful avenues for rural women to exercise their voices and participate in policies and programs at all levels and in all phases. Today, our first panelist, Silvia Barbatello, the project coordinator for Ciheam, Enhancing Gender Mainstreaming for Sustainable Rural Development and Food Security Action Process. We'll call it GEMSAF later, it will be much easier. Silvia will discuss the ways this project has been engaging women's voices in new ways in the context of COVID-19. Another key takeaway from our online discussion was the persistent need for innovation, without which transformative change will remain out of reach. Our second panelist, Mrs. Rizlen and Majra Marnouch, will discuss the innovative bottom-up solution she has found in the context of her work as a social entrepreneur and activist for the regenerative economy and the founder of the Human for Humans initiative, as well as the ways in which these can be used for transformative economic change. Finally, our third panelist, Meher Khalifi, founder of the startup Harmony, will share with us his work dedicated to enhancing the social coverage of rural women working in the agricultural sector. We would like to congratulate Meher and his team at the Harmony Works because their work has been translated into legal amendments in Tunisia. And this is a critical message we try to convey at the OECD. To our Social Institution and Gender Index, which focuses on the discriminatory formal and informal laws and practices, we have seen that legal frameworks are the starting points. Legal reforms can change something, but that is not in us. That is not in us because often it is not adapted to address the specific challenges that rural women face. Often, those women are not aware of their own rights, not able to claim them. This is why we will be very happy to hear from Meher, because those good practices could be shared more broadly. And I think this is something very important to keep in mind throughout this session. Women is not an homogeneous group. Intersectionality is key in our today's discussion. Rural women face cumulative discrimination, yet as countries prepare their recovery phase to be inclusive, not leave anyone behind, to be effective, countries should first understand and second address rural women's challenges. And this is what we will try to get today. So let me begin this roundtable with the first question for our three panelists. I remind you that you have 3 minutes each to answer the question. So the COVID crisis has both exacerbated pre-crisis challenges, specifically faced by rural women, but has also created new ones. Silvia, Rizlen, Meher, based on your own analysis, your own experience, what are the main challenges rural women face today? Have they been exacerbated or created by the current crisis? Silvia. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gaëlle. Thank you, UfM, for this opportunity. You already introduced me and the project that today I represent here, GEMISA, as you said, so we will be short and the title is very long. Okay, I would like to share on the screen for a few seconds PowerPoint, if I can. I will. Okay. Voila. Can you see it? I hope so. I don't know.
No, we can't.
Okay, I will do better, I guess. Okay, no problem. I will do later. It was working, but I don't know why now it's not working anymore. Okay, you already introduced myself and the project, but I will share the information later. Just to invite if someone is interested to have a look to what we do and to our communication channel. So, as you said, I'm trying to bring the voice of a development cooperation project. So let's say I will represent today 5 South Mediterranean countries plus Italy, let's say, and Bari, which I represent. So I will try to bring our own experience on the field.
Sorry, Sylvia, to interrupt you, but we can see now your slides. So please let us know if you want us to change the slides.
No, okay, you can? Okay, great. So, okay, these are just our, let's say, communication channel, the website and the Facebook where you can find information. As you can see, I mean, we have 5 countries involved in the project, and all of the information concerning what we are doing can be found here. So I will not bother anymore with this, but as far as I was saying, I think as development project, I think the main challenge that you're asking for is to consider that COVID as socioeconomic impact, which is in fact still to be measured, as Marcela Villarreal said very well before. Especially in rural contexts that were already highly vulnerable and fragile. And this vulnerability has been reflected in women's life much more before the emergency. So basically, I'm referring to structural obstacles that our keynote speakers mentioned before, that are usually linked to social norms, traditions, access to resources, training, information, credits, basic services, social security, obstacles that somehow limit the chances for women living in rural areas to actively and visibly, let's say, participate in rural development and agricultural processes. Moreover, these fragilities are embedded in often complex political contexts. Let's say if we think about Palestine is a clear example. So the consequences of the COVID crisis must be somehow read within the feature of this context. Let's say that they cannot be isolated, no? COVID consequence cannot be isolated from context analysis. So therefore, for example, let's say the alleged increase in unemployment of men migrating from rural to urban areas to look for a job, and maybe now returning to their areas of origin to work the land, must make us wonder what does it mean for women in terms of competition, for example, over access and use of resources, as also Marcela was saying before, market access and agencies. These are, I mean, what we can bring from our experience, I must say.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Rizlan, do you have the same feeling in Morocco? Is it the same experience? Sorry, Rizlan, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Bonjour à tous, merci pour l'invitation.
Good morning, everybody. Well, I'll try to stick to the 3 minutes. Thank you very much for having invited me. Well, I'm going to talk about 3 points, namely the anti-COVID context, before COVID context, because the crisis existed before the COVID, and then the negative impact. Because I think that today, well, it's also about giving some hope. So I'm going to tackle this future ahead of us in the third point. Female rural population is huge. We have 60% of these women who are in the age of activity, and we want to develop rural world, and we see that there's the emergence of a rural class that has launched ambitious programs for many years. There are some quite extraordinary initiatives. There's Euramed since 2011, which is a first draft of health coverage for rural areas. And we have identified 15 million people who are especially vulnerable in those areas. And in spite of all those initiatives, it's true that women remain the weakest link, actually, in all of this. They're much more hit by this vulnerability in rural areas than in urban. So there's the problem of access to health coverage. There's the problem of access as well to school. Illiteracy rate is twice as high as in urban areas. There's also a very high rate of dropouts amongst children going to school in rural areas. And there's also activities in rural areas that are poorly qualified, actually, and women in rural areas are poorly qualified. And very few of them are landlords. So on top of that, there's the informal work or underground work. And this is the context that we found before the crisis. And well, on top of that, we've got the COVID. And I would like to remind you that, well, I'm a social entrepreneur. I've been a social entrepreneur for 15 years, and I was lucky enough to create an entrepreneurial social commission years ago. And I already said during an intergovernmental meeting that we could not flourish in a sick society. And actually, the current crisis has only aggravated what the reality was before. I'm going to give you some figures. Poverty has been aggravated at all levels. Also, we've suffered in the field of education, in the field of health. Now, in terms of health, 35% of women have renounced to their prenatal care and postnatal care. There's the problem with the virus. There's the problem with e-health. So actually, vaccination amongst children has been reduced by 45%. There's also the work of women at home, and the overload is 6 times higher for women than for men. And on top of that, we've heard it already, there's domestic violence. So we have to say as well that children were left at home and they couldn't go to school. There's also a digital gap. And on top of that, there's the money problem or the money issue in terms of the economic impact. We have assessed that 1 million people that were already vulnerable to poverty are today even more concerned about this problem, and women are disproportionately more concerned because they're really hit by this collateral damage in economic terms, all related to lockdown, to an industrial slowdown. Let me remind you that we've lost 25% of exports. There's also the crisis in tourism sector, and the impact of all that in agri-food sector. And when we talk about rural fabric, we talk about really small and micro, small enterprises. So there's also the closure of different units of food processing and packaging. So, and the logistics crisis as well. So now, if I have to tell you about the positive impact, Ghislaine, well, actually, I have to interrupt you because I would like you to stress on the positive side, but afterwards. But well, of course, it's also very human to tell about the bad news first, even though we know that there are some positive insights. But Meher, maybe I'll give you the floor and see if you have the same experience, if you had the same experience as what Sylvia and Ghislaine were saying.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be with you today. My only objective is to ensure protection in the rural areas, protection of women in rural settings. And undoubtedly, we have several categories under this group. We have women who work in agriculture, women who work in artisanal and handicraft projects. We have also rural women who own a piece of land or a small business. The impact of COVID-19 pandemic in rural settings varies according to the daily activities of women. We have women working in the agricultural field, and the only challenge for such women is to provide a living for herself and her family. Whatever the reasons and the situations are, women never stopped working amidst the pandemic, because in Tunisia, without daily work, you can never ensure food security. Women cannot ensure food security because she is in charge of the entire family in such cases. Now we can mention 80% of women who have been out for work and never stopped. 20%, for example, who have to commute for long distances are affected. Now, regarding those women who work in traditional businesses and marketing at the national level or abroad, such women have incurred tremendous losses because of the lack of marketing of the daily products and commodities, which adversely affected their situations. A large number of products are stored in warehouses and are never circulated in the labor market, which had negatively affected the daily social situation in terms of the daily income and remuneration. In rural settings, we can say that there are issues of communication and transportation between the urban and rural settings. No communication bridges, even in terms of food commodities, especially amidst the pandemic, and that's due to the general lockdown. In Ahmini, the startup company, we've intervened several times and we've developed several applications, new applications, in order to help provide the technological means to provide all food assistance and financial assistance to the doorsteps without having women move anywhere. Even in terms of food supplies, we have developed a new application to ensure the arrival of all needed supplies, financial supplies as well, through a mobile phone that is not necessarily a smartphone. So she can easily contact any closest grocery shop or supermarket, and such points and financial remuneration can be provided, and in exchange she can get the food supplies that are needed. So the pandemic, especially in the first wave of the pandemic, a big impact was felt amongst women, even in terms of social coverage. Here we can say that there is an incapacity to withdraw all financial amounts that can be collected through the social security, which would ensure social and medical protection. That's something we're currently trying to address, and the impact is felt at a large scope, but we can do more because it's been many years that we work in this field, and we know how to come up with solutions that would serve women in rural settings.
Well, you were talking about what has been developed in your countries. And what I find interesting, and actually, Ghislaine, I'm going to give you the floor right away, because, well, we always say that behind the thread, there's always something good. I mean, by these terms, that the crisis has really pushed us to think beyond and to implement solutions in the field. And actually, this is what you did. You didn't wait for decision makers or organizations to react, and we all know that sometimes policies take a while to come up. So you really reacted soon enough. So what, Ghislaine, what, according to you, is the positive side of all of this? And within this positive side, what should we keep in mind for the future? Well, thank you very much. I would like to answer this question talking about 2 points. The positive impact of the COVID is that, well, it really shook us when it came to country decision making. I mean, the high level decisions. We still are facing a health emergency, but it's true that unprecedented measures were undertaken in order to lead to a socio-economical recovery. There are measures that have concerned 5 million people in precarious situation in rural world. There's also an implementation of a COVID fund up to $3 billion that has been put in place. And we have also generalized social protection. So to me, this is a big asset, and we are really setting here a social, solid economy. Now, it is true that for actors in the field, it's very nice to give us the floor, but well, COVID was somehow an opportunity. We're activists, and we've been activists for many years, because it's true that I've been working in this area for 15 years, and sometimes we've been unheard and we've gone invisible. But now it is true that it is mandatory to lead to a transformation in society in order to create wealth. And this can not only be done amongst the private and public sector. We have to bear in mind actors in the field, because they are there to provide solutions. So whenever the crisis is exceptional, it requires exceptional solutions. And I would like to share with you that we need to renew our ideas. We need to reflect upon all of this in order to act together. And this is actually what we find very difficult to do, because sometimes policies are defined in a vertical way. And today we're witnessing the emergence of a civil society that is differently structured. And we are entrepreneurs, and we have all realized that if we want to implement social economy, and if we want this to become our social and distribution model, if we want this to be a backbone, well, then the muscles have to be the actors of social economy. But it's true that all these actors are scattered around. There is no such thing as an ecosystem. There are ecosystems. And besides my own activism, because I'm working in social engineering and social and economic impact, we have decided to create a bottom-up initiative, a multidimensional initiative, because sometimes we tend to work in silos, and now we need to provide innovative, pragmatic solutions, specific solutions, because the crisis has taught us all that we need to do better with less resources. So for us, well, we are trying to design solutions, and we are calling upon NGOs, women, actors in the field, civil society, in order to provide solutions that are sustainable. I would like to give you some examples. Yes, it has to be quick. Now, during the lockdown, we deployed a campaign called Bags, and actually cooperatives needed an economic income because they couldn't get rid of their stocks. So in 10 days, we built partnerships with civil society and with the support of the Ministry of Economy, and we mobilized 80 tons of goods that were collected from remote areas and that were distributed for free. And we put in place a circular economy system in less than 10 days with all the logistic problems that the lockdown entailed. We also launched other programs. Maybe I can talk about them further on. There's also an experience related to Fab Labs, and we've talked about Fab Labs, but we've been working on Fab Labs for many years now. And through Fab Labs, we're giving students the right to experience and to experiment, and we have to really pursue that. And I would like to tell you as well, and I'm very glad to tell you this, and this is a project in which I've been working for 3 years. It is a project about the right to experiment. Now, today we're living in times of uncertainty, and to conclude, I would like to say that our next step is to really be more and more ambitious, and not only to think about the short term, but rather to think about a systemic change. And today we are finalizing a project, a rural innovation project in Africa, and we're going to mix different actors in order to provide a social impact and innovation. Thank you very much, Ghislaine. I am so sorry for cutting you. Meher, could you please complete what Ghislaine was saying? What has happened in Tunisia, and how could you work in times of emergency, as Ghislaine was saying, well, not only to provide a punctual response, but rather a structural response?
Thank you very much again. To tell you the truth, in rural areas, women have several issues in Tunisia. The social coverage, the lack of decent transportation means and communication means, lack of economic empowerment, lack of cultural and social empowerment. All of these are issues facing women in the rural settings, and the COVID-19 pandemic added up to that. So as a group of young men and women, we decided to play this game against time. How can we intervene in the shortest possible period of time with a positive impact? So we conceived a strategical plan. We worked 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, in coordination with the state of Tunisia, the regional and the local administrations, and we've developed several interventions. We do have enough experience, and we have been present in the different global spheres. And I can say that what can be developed in the future and what needs to be the case is for us to be ready for any new virus or pandemic that can affect the lives of rural women. Now we can say that we are better placed. We are ready to face any sudden virus shock, any new pandemic would allow us to use what is available to us. One of the positivities is that we're able to intervene at the right moment in the right place and with the right speed in order to find the right solutions. And what really helped us with that is that we were able to take the decision as a group of founders of Ahmini or Protect Me. We young men and women would present the problematics, find solutions, and intervene quickly in the field. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meher. Sylvia, could you please tell us about your own experience on this and this positive side, actually? Well, the good things that arose from the situation, from such a difficult situation or unprecedented situation. So could you tell us a bit more about the positive side?
Thank you, Gael. I guess my colleagues already answered to a lot of the issues, so I will try to be very brief, even because, as I told you, I represent not just Tunisia or Morocco, but today I represent 5 countries, so I will try to sum up the main issues. It is difficult for us to say what is really effective, but certainly the crisis, at least for those who are working in the field of development cooperation, which I'm talking about, has made possible to consider alternative means of communication and interaction, which in normal time brackets were not fully considered. For example, the chance, as Meher was talking about before, I guess, to use and buy and use mobile phones, maybe not smart, but sometimes it's difficult even to have mobile phones in rural areas. And for women that we are supporting with the project so that they could stay in touch, in contact with the project staff, with institutions at local and national level, with us that are in Italy, and use them as well for, let's say, monitoring purposes of the project, because now we cannot go on the field, so it's very difficult for us. More generally, I think that the emergency period has created a variety of opportunities for using technologies that can ensure the continuation of the activities, follow-up, monitoring, as I was saying. But the impact and the accessibility of these technologies should be carefully assessed, no? As they might create new spaces for dialogue from one side and participation, of course, for rural women in the aftermath of the emergency, because this is what we are looking for, as well as address the multiple vulnerabilities that already exist. However, even though technologies can represent a new opportunity, we must take into consideration that we are talking about rural, remote areas most of the time, where IT infrastructure, logistic are not yet properly developed. So IT gap has to be properly addressed, I might say. And I thank Meher for sharing this information. I just want to add that as Jemiza project, he might doesn't know that, but for our women in Tunisia, we are trying to support also them to join Ahmini platform. So inshallah, we would be able to help them in joining this opportunity, let's say. Thank you. I'm very brief.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Thank you all. And I think that what you say is a very good point. Digital gap, digital gender gap, digital solutions are unfortunately not affordable and available to all of us. So we already struggle with our Zoom meetings. So as you rightly remind us, technology could be an opportunity, but it could also just widen existing gaps, especially between rural and urban settings. Thank you all for such inspiring discussion. It was very exciting to have you there. And this is only the beginning, because we will have quite soon a Q&A session allowing all attendees to ask questions. But before that, let me share with you a short video of Mrs. Imahan Etri. She's a founder and manager of Ciheam. And Mrs. Etri is a Ciheam project beneficiary through Devloc, financed by the European Union. She has a small business of milk products. And you will see in this video that she really explained how she is dealing with the COVID-19 crisis on a daily basis. So if you can have the video, and then let's move to the Q&A session. Thank you.
السلام عليكم. أنا عرست عن 85. لقيت راجلي عنده فيرما متاع
Good afternoon. We have a farm and we milk cows. We sell milk and we turn milk into cheese. So we've been working on this for a year. Then COVID outbreak was extremely difficult and the service was interrupted. I tried to follow up. I tried to sustain the business. COVID impacted me by 50%. So we tried, based on how easy commuting was and transportation was, we were able to bring in fodder and produce more milk. But then I had to store in the supplies and the fodder so that we wouldn't have the supply interrupted. Then when we had the lockdown, I faced an impasse. The service provider who provided us with milk also stopped, and it was really difficult for us. The head of the municipality gave me licensing to work on exceptional hours and to carry on. They gave me an authorization to commute even during the lockdown. So I was delivering the products. So during the COVID, yes, the production decreased. The service provider I had contracted stopped coming. So I called him during the confinement and I told him, I'm coming to take the supplies, and instead of coming twice or thrice, I can get the amount I need and store it so that I can keep providing the service and providing the products. So there was some fight and with a supplier, but then we had resolved this dispute amicably, and I managed eventually to carry on. So gradually we resumed the production of all the different products while taking all the necessary precaution measures, the social distancing, wearing the mask, disinfecting and sterilizing. Now we're back on for a second phase of COVID-19. I am a little bit concerned about the upcoming situation and the circumstances. I know there will be more restrictions. Maybe there will be a total lockdown. I don't know what to do if the milk service provider, the milk provider will stop. I will have to find a way, but it is really worrying me. In the future, I want to see how to get some support, maybe through a governmental assistance or some sort of a loan. I need to carry on with the service.
C'est très intéressant de voir à la fois comment l'être humain...
It was very interesting to see how human beings can adapt to any situation. But what I believe is absolutely paramount to the discussion and the debate that we have today. As we saw in this video, we need to go beyond. We need to be imaginative. And this is what I want to talk about.
As well as Mrs. Villarreal and Mr. Mizzi. I just remind 5 of you that you have about 2 minutes to answer the question, and I will try to do my best to keep the time. And the first question I have is really related to the ways forwards, because I think that what you said, Rizlan, and all of you, is that, okay, we had to go through a very unprecedented time, very gloomy situation, but what's next? And so what we have learned at the OECD Development Center, working on social norms, is that to protect rural women, policies and programs must take into account the invisible part of the iceberg. And notably, as some of you mentioned, the customary ways that household assets, including importantly land, are managed, controlled, and passed on within their own families and communities. So if I would have something to say, is that we have also always to be very careful with this top-down approach, because the way the measures we are thinking are implemented on the field are not always the way we expected them to be. So these will be my main recommendation. But please, Meher, Sylvia, Rizlan, Mrs. Villarreal, Mr. Mizzi, if you would have only one recommendation, what would it be? So, Meher, please, can you begin with one of your main recommendations for addressing rural women's needs? Meher? Meher, can you hear me? So, well, maybe I can give the floor. I will try to be a bit gender balanced. So I will give the floor to Mr. Mizzi.
Thank you, Gael. First of all, what Ghizlan said and what Meher said, first, good policies. The video showed with European Union support, first of all, we need to have the safety net because COVID has created shocks around social protection, around liquidity. So the European Union globally mobilized 36 billion with our member states and with our financial institutions. So first priority is a safety net and a cadre, a framework for communities to bounce back. I think what Ghislaine also showed is there are good success stories. In the European Union, we have a program called SwitchMed, which has done a lot of work also around green recovery and around digital. Digital, as you said, is part of the solution, but it's not the silver bullet, because digital, if not well structured, can create extra inequalities. But local supply circuits with digital, with a rights-based approach, is the combination of a more long-term solution. And with Sylvia, with FAO, I think we have 6 to 9 months of opportunities. And I hope that the Italian G20 presidency with ICE, with Ciheam, with ourselves can showcase with the Rome-based agencies solutions and cases where things are working in a positive way. I think we have sufficient evidence from Tunisia to Morocco to other parts of the Mediterranean that there are solutions where there are women-led solutions and women entrepreneurs. And if the framework conditions with good policy making are actually embedded in the system, the build up back better is actually a reality. So let's use the coming 6 to 12 months of events with the Italian G20 presidency, and the European Union is there also to support and also to give ideas and to accompany the governments, because if there is a will, clearly there is a way.
Thank you, Mr. Mezzi. Mrs. Villarreal, do you have one key recommendation you would like to share with us?
Thank you so much. Actually, we understand gender as a system of relations and power relations, which actually determine an outcome of inequality or equality, if we wish. We need to have a systemic response. And I think this was said very nicely by Ghislaine. So we need to have a systemic response. And a systemic response, the problem is that you need to have impacts on many different aspects at the same time. You need the data, you need to look at the jobs, look at the health, look at the division, the relations of power within the household, all of these things at the same time. And that is very, very difficult from a policy perspective. Now, if I were to choose one and only one policy intervention that I believe, and this is over more than 30 years of having worked with rural women, I would say organization, voice, and empowerment through ensuring that women have a voice in the decisions that are going to affect them. So empower women to be able to participate. That in itself will open doors around the spectrum of access to resources, change access to land, change other issues that are going to affect their life. So through participation in organizations, strengthen organizations, ensure that their voice is heard throughout all of the policy process, we will have definitely an important change, and all the more so in times of crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that this is something that we all agree that rural women are also strong enough to find the solution by themselves, and that we need to help them doing so by unlocking their empowerment opportunities. Meher, can I come back to you and ask you whether you would have only one recommendation? What would it be? I'm sorry, as I'm not sure that Meher can hear me, I will try again to send him a text. And maybe if I can come back to you, Sylvia, what would be your recommendation?
Okay. Okay. Well, as a project and Ciheam body, between May and June, we have engaged with our institutional partners in a reflection on the expected impact of COVID-19 on both on the project activities and how gender issues could be adequately mainstreamed in the responses. We had the chance to follow up on this in October during a seminar and a roundtable that we held in collaboration with FAO, senior gender expert from ESP department and division, and a lot of recommendation, food for thoughts for the future have emerged from the seminar, from the dialogue among the countries and FAO partner. So I will try to sum up very quickly. And I think that we should avoid assuming that women will continue to bear the burden of socioeconomic crisis, supporting families with their productive, though informal, as Ms. Marcella said before, and care activities. It's not just a matter of productive activities. Make sure that the intersectional issues are considered. Besides gender, there are multiple factors that contribute to vulnerability. We should avoid overgeneralization, start asking ourselves, who are these vulnerable women? What contributes to their vulnerability, which factors can alleviate them, who are the vulnerable men as well, because men are fully involved in the process if we talk about women, and start considering these variables, which are a lot, through comprehensive programs and policies that are based on sound data, as we were saying before, that can address the need of the most exposed to the crisis at the time we are talking about. To do so, for how trivial it might sound, adequate financial support is needed. Hence the importance of synergies and alliances to channel also resources in the right direction. In-depth dialogue among donors, international implementing agencies, civil society, local partners, institutional partners at field level, and of course, the final user, our beneficiaries, because we are all here for them. And in this way, maybe we can listen to their voice, and which is really crucial to this end. So let's say a comprehensive framework should be really taken into serious account from now on. That's it.
Thank you, Sylvia. Ghislaine, would you have also a recommendation to make?
Well, in fact, j'ai plusieurs recommandations, mais je vais en faire une.
C'est difficile.
I have many recommendations, but I will just only give you one. Thank you very much for this fantastic exchange. I believe the most important question is, how are we going to face the impact of COVID? So thank you very much, Mr. Mizzi and Madame Villarreal. When I hear you, it gives me hope. Now we have to be audacious. The idea is that the international institutions, through innovative ways of funding, they need really to see the new emergence of new crisis, new situations. We need to have hundreds of organizations like Maroc Impact, who are also local actors, who are just in the territory, who are not old NGOs, because we need to have new stakeholders in order to refresh this ecosystem. These organizations need to be able to analyze, to think, to be autonomous at a local level in order to be able to act. And I propose this. Can we think maybe to create a certain initiative based on the civil society in the Mediterranean, a strong initiative that will identify the stakeholders of change, to have a cartography of the different initiatives, a platform to exchange all the different initiatives in order to be able to exchange all the information, in order to replicate these examples in our countries and also give an example to the world. And as Maroc impact, basically the public policies cannot be top-down policies, even if these are experts. So please give us some space to the civil society to participate, because our main role is just to help you to reinvent yourselves and to really reduce costs and to be much better.
Have, unfortunately, very few data. So to provide a recommendation to elaborate evidence-based policies, we are a bit, it's a bit complicated because of this data scarcity. On the other way, we do have some examples of good practices. However, sometimes they can be anecdotal, and we know that what could work in some place at some time will not work everywhere. So the question is, given the scarcity of data that doesn't allow us to have evidence-based policies, given that good practices are sometimes anecdotal, how can we scale up the things? And then, for sure, scale up the things. How do we improve the dialogue between the various stakeholders to ensure that the voice of women and OSGs, or the Organization of Civil Societies, are also translated into changes at the national and international level? I think that we have all to learn from each other, but how can we do that? And again, how can we ensure that what we think is framed in a way that will really, again, address women's needs everywhere? So I don't know whether, Rizlan, you want to begin with that, because you raised the question of dialogue. So would you have an idea how better improving this dialogue?
Je pense que j'ai un peu répondu à la question précédemment. Je pense que
I just responded to the question before. I believe that it is absolutely paramount to create a collective space for reflection and pondering, where the civil society doesn't come at the end of the process, and many times just a formal presence there. We need to make sure that we're just building these public policies all together. I have such a passion for our continent and for my country. That's why I'm just working for free, and I am working on an initiative that is called Africa Impact. But the problem is that we need to be more visible. We need our voice to be heard. We need to be well funded, because we are agile, we are new. So basically, we're not receiving all the European funds. So basically, we are tanks of expertise. We are innovative laboratories that are just creating new solutions. And anything that can work in Morocco can work in Africa or anywhere else. So that's why we need to create this collective space in order to create immediate solutions. Because, as Gael said, this is not the first health crisis that will be facing, and we need to be more horizontal.
Organizations, you're also working with data. So how can you at the CM also help to foster this dialogue?
Is it for me? Sorry, because I didn't.
Yes, please.
Sorry, because I couldn't hear. Thank you. Okay, concerning data, I mean, assuming that there is a lack of data, as you said before, in any case, decision-making processes must be as much as representative as possible. So if women's voice is missing from the process, any policy or program or initiative will not be effective if data are missing and lacking. In any case, data collection remains crucial, and the crisis have once more highlighted that, in fact, it's not possible anymore to derogate the need to collect disaggregate data. So, as a project, for example, we are trying to implement a data collection through a very simple open source softwares that also considering the possibility to carry out interviews or focus group, whatever it is, by phone, whenever mobility do not allow us to go out on the field or our national local partners on the field. So I think that international cooperation in this sense can play a key role to facilitate and promote an efficient data collection system among national institutions, implementing agencies. There is a need of time and resources, but it's really mandatory to start collecting data at local level in rural areas with our women.
Thank you. I think that Mrs. Villarreal, you can tell us a bit more about that, because the FAO has been doing so much in terms of data collection on land, and we all know how difficult it is. You also have tried your best to have this dialogue with the civil societies and to try to have this bottom-up approach. But maybe you can have some good ideas on how we can foster this dialogue, and also how we can, again, scale up the good practices you have been identifying on the field.
Thank you. On the one hand, yes, we are always facing a scarcity of data, all the more so as we move towards the SDG framework reporting, which is very, very intense in data. And we know and we see that we don't have the data, especially gender disaggregated. This is a must. However, we've also, as FAO's custodian for 2 of the gender and land indicators, and we have had a lot of trouble for countries to report on the quality, even on the qualitative aspects of gender and land. It's been difficult, I must say. So, however, on the other hand, even if we don't have data, and Gael, I disagree with you a little bit more that we cannot do evidence-based policy. I think we have, on some issues, we have enough data that will allow us to have sound policy. On the other hand,
COVID, you mean?
COVID has kind of pushed us to improve the data management processes. We have launched platforms and but in any case, then there's the other issue, which is, as you mentioned, more anecdotal or good practice. But however, some things around gender inequalities in the rural areas, quite frankly, governments should be already be investing in those. Like, for example, how is it possible that rural women have to spend, we calculated this some years ago, 40 billion hours, only in sub-Saharan Africa, 40 billion hours of women's time had gone to collect water. Quite frankly, you don't need to either have any evidence-based study. You don't need to have any technology that will take you to the moon. You don't need to have any sophisticated instrument to understand that by investing a little bit of money in ensuring that women don't have to spend all that human energy, physical energy in fetching water, by simple technology that everybody can have. It's just a policy issue. It's just a political will issue. So some activities, some actions can be done instantly without any need of evidence, right? If we need to kind of have a lot of very detailed evidence for some other policies. Some of these things are so instant. We would need to do them instantly. Now, there are mechanisms throughout the UN where civil society has not only a possibility to participate, but a right to participate. And this has taken us years to get it. It was not like this, and c'est pas un acquis. So, Committee on Food Security. Committee on Food Security, civil society has the right to speak at the level of governments, and this is quite unusual in the UN. So governments speak, civil society speak, and it has the same weight. So this is but these are spaces that we have been opening with time. We also have instruments like, for example, the voluntary guidelines for the responsible governance of the tenure of land, fisheries, and forestry. And this is, again, something that took years to get through the Committee on Food Security. Today, we have that instrument which relies on participation of civil society together with governments and together with the other non-state actors. And now we have, as we speak, we have a new land policy in Sierra Leone. We have a new land policy in Mongolia that address women's access to land. And this is through the involvement of civil society together with the governments, creating those spaces. So we do have instruments, and now the issue is how we can ensure that they're used even more, that more of that space is gained by civil society.
Thanks, Mrs. Villarreal. I have a lot of questions coming from the chat box. And one is actually asking, how can we make sure that the recovery measures go beyond the aspect of food security and nutrition, and also focus on increasing women's income and livelihood? Who would like to answer this question that is quite ambitious in 2 minutes, but if you can already have some insights, it would be really great. Mrs. Villarreal, can I ask you to take the floor with this question, and then maybe Sylvia and Rizlan can react, as the two others as apparently.
Can you rephrase the question, because I lost you a little bit in the connection.
Oh yes, of course. So the question is asking actually how the recovery measures, because we are really here to discuss the COVID-19 recovery measures, and that's regarding the COVID-19 measure that we were saying that there is scarcity of data. How this could go beyond the aspect of food security and nutrition for rural women, and really ensure that it increase women's income and livelihoods in rural settings.
Right. It goes very much together. It's okay. At FAO, we're very worried that this health crisis is becoming a food crisis, and it is becoming. So we know that by the end of the year, the number of hungry people will have increased from 80 million or even up to 130 million of additional hungry people because of COVID, right? So how can we ensure that the measures go beyond food security? Food security requires livelihoods. You cannot attain food security if you don't have access to an income, if you don't have a job, if you don't have access to markets, and if you don't have a productive possibility in the agricultural area, if that is what you do. So the food security is probably different from food aid. Food aid is in times of crisis, food is taken and very, very diligently and very effectively, for example, by the World Food Programme, to people who are in need of food for that day, for them to continue living. So that's food aid, and that's quite important. And it's also an important part of a package of social protection. Now, food security, which means that basically you're empowered to produce your own food or buy your own food. And that is food security. So this is what we want, to ensure that people are empowered, and all the more so, rural women are empowered with everything that they need to be able to ensure their own and their families, their communities' food security.
Is there anything to add on this point that has been very well framed by Mrs. Villarreal?
Concrètement, ce qui me paraît essentiel quand on parle de la sécurité alimentaire.
Well, actually, when we think about food security and bearing in mind that we all agree regarding actions, well, to me, the response goes through innovation hubs that may be rooted in the field, where you can put in practice solutions around circular economy. And this is what we're doing actually in Hanna, an area near Marrakesh, with a project that is about brotherhood. The name of the project is Brotherhood, and it's about a holistic approach. We tackle different issues. We tackle food security. We tackle digital breach or digital gap. We tackle women's income. And well, this is rooted in the territory. And I think this is a response, a possible response for solutions for tomorrow. Sylvia, I would like to give you the floor to finish the session and to answer this question.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Of course, I fully agree with Marcela Villarreal, but maybe we should take in consideration that it's not just a matter of economic and productive activities, because women, as we know, are much more, are very into also a private framework, no? So there is a public life, which means also productive and economic activities, and nutrition and food security, and what she already perfectly said. But we should take in consideration that maybe we have to not to create other gaps that can occur maybe in tackling just women in this process, because when we talk about women, we talk about gender as well. So we should really pay attention how to balance our interventions towards women and for women in the society, in the context, in the community where they are framed. So yes, innovation, yes, food security give this opportunity, but let's consider all the other factors that can affect our interventions, let's say. But they already said everything, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all of you for all the speakers for this very interesting session. We suggest to the conclusion, as we would have a general conclusion at the end of the side event. And as we are already a bit late, what we suggest is to go directly to session 2. But before that, my colleagues take the floor and discuss how strengthening resilience of women through training, research, and innovation in rural areas and agri-food sectors. Let's have a short break. So we will have 3 minutes to breathe a bit. In Africa, we call it health break, not coffee break. That's good, especially in terms with this kind of virtual meeting. In any case, it has been my pleasure to moderate this session, and I hope that we keep discussing this very important issue of COVID-19 and women in rural areas. Thank you so much, and stay tuned.
Thanks, Gail.
Thank you.